Good evening and welcome to our next edition of Better, Smarter Learning. And here with me this evening is Kelly Armatage. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you doing, Rachel? Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. So just to kick off the show and introduce the show, this edition of Better, Smarter Learning is sponsored by Passion Toolset, and passiontoolset.com is a tool set for initiative fatigue for coaches, leaders and students of learning and permanently shifting mental blocks. And it does that by identifying low performing psychological habits and then giving you 5-minute daily tasks to identify your higher performing habits. So that's Passion Toolset. Thank you for the sponsorship. And now on to the show with Kelly Armatage. Kelly Armatage, I actually met through watching her do a TEDx talk, which she's recently done this year. And Kelly is a cognitive behavioural therapist, a coach, and also a speaker, and she goes and talks to lots of large organisations about addictions and codependency. Is that right, Kelly?
Yeah, well, it's all subjects really, all behavioural subjects. It could be addiction, codependency, it could be self-esteem, it could be anger, it could be entrepreneurship, parenting, any behavioural subject, ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, and you've been doing this for about 13 years now, you say, Kelly?
Yeah, that's right. I had a clinic in the Middle East for 12 years, and then I went over to New York for a year, and I'm now back in the UK. So, yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you back, and I would urge anybody to go and watch your TEDx talk, Kelly Armatage, and at the end we'll get some details from you. So if you want to explain to us a bit, Kelly, because what really struck me when I researched you, in some of you have an ASK technique, ASK, which you use, and a Serenity Kit is what it stands for, which I love. And from your 13 years that you've done, very much what I've done with the tool set is from your years of watching how things work and how they don't work, you've actually come up with a format, a really easy formula for people to run through to identify blockages, but then a new way of them identifying new behaviours and just allowing themselves to be really compassionate on themselves. And that's what I loved about your technique. So do you want to explain to people a bit more about the technique and why it's so easy and how it works so easily with people?
Yeah, sure. So having run my clinic in the Middle East, I was doing thousands upon thousands of sessions, and I'd get people to come and see me, and I would be able to shift them in one session on major stuff like insomnia, maybe even eating disorders, long-term relationship issues, confidence. And I was getting tired of people coming to me and saying, I've been to see a psychologist for 18 months and I still have my OCD. And I'm like, why aren't these, why isn't there more tools out there for people to shift stuff very quickly? So having studied CBT, NLP, TFT, EFT, the work, I wanted to create a 3-step technique that the public could use on themselves without needing to pay a psychologist for 18 months to get rid of or to not get rid of a behavior. So I went to the Titan Summit with Robin Sharma, and Richard Branson was speaking there along with some amazing big top speakers. And after that Titan Summit, I came away with the idea to invent Ask. And it was initially 25 steps, but I brainstormed it down to 3 steps. It took me 2 years to create and launch. And the Ask technique can be used on any issue. It might be any block, any problem in your health, in your finances, in your career, in your parenting, in your past. Yeah. It's wonderful for past trauma. So yeah, it's a cognitive technique for the public, and they don't need a therapist or a facilitator. Having said that, we do have therapists and coaches that study a ICF accredited course if they want to become an Ask facilitator.
Great. So where do you start with people on kind of the pain, where they're at the pain point? Because, as we all know, you either move towards pleasure or move away from pain. So you look at that first. Can you say just a little bit on what sort of questions you'll ask people?
Yeah, so ask people, where are you most dissatisfied? And they might say, I hate that I was bullied at school, or I hate my boss, or I don't like that me and my wife argue. So you get the pain point, which is ultimately the thought pattern. And then you get the 3 emotions that are attached to that. you know, I don't like my boss, I feel frustrated, sad, powerless. And then you get the how much out of 10 is that emotional reaction. So yeah, you get the thought and the emotional reaction to it, and it can be on any area of life. So that's the first part.
And is there importance why you get the emotions for them to identify those emotions?
Yeah, because it shows, you know, if it's like 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, that's where we would like it to be, because it shows it's a deep emotional reaction. It shows the thought and it shows the feelings produced from that perception. So that's the first part. And then ultimately we go down into the 3 steps, which are, do you want me to go through this now?
Yeah, one question I would ask on the emotions is the first question I had for you. That's a surprise question. We mentioned before we were going to talk about the questions, but we said no, I'll surprise you with them. So does all the emotional conditioning that we have, Kelly, come from our parents, from our parenting? Yeah.
From our emotion, you know, when I talk about emotions here, our thoughts create our emotions. Our thoughts create our emotional reactions. So when we're starting with this technique, it will obviously be a pain that we have, such as, I don't like my boss, I hate that I'm arguing with my wife, I don't like that I'm constantly bankrupt. So that thought will create emotions such as anger, sadness, guilt, whatever it might be. If we were then to go into the technique where we go into step 2 of the picked up habits, a lot of that is conditioning from parents. Yes. Right. If it hasn't been, yes.
Okay, so let's go into step 2 then.
Yeah, so okay, so with the technique, you come up with the issue and the pain. Yeah. Step 1 is how committed are you to overcoming this issue and working through this technique. So the person will say, well, I have a 10 out of 10, which is a high commitment to solve this issue. And then step 2 is picked up habit, payoff, and plan. So we are in pain because we are carrying out behaviors and habits and actions that are creating that result. So for example, if we were to say, I don't like my boss, then if we were to work through the technique, step 2 will be, what is the picked up habit of yourself and the boss? So it could be that the boss is critical or that he's a bully. That's his picked up habit. And then your picked up habit could be judging your boss, resentment towards your boss, and allowing criticism. And there could be another habit there, which is staying stuck in this job, settling in this job. So yeah, our picked up habits are picked up from past events or from parental conditioning or from messages received as a result of events. So if your parents divorced when you were 12, for example, you could have picked up the habit of having fear around relationships.
Yeah. Okay. And the second question I had was, and I know we haven't got there yet, but is there a specific part in us that you find people have the biggest light bulb moment, you know? And when I say light bulb, I mean like realization of where they might have been stuck all their life or something, just for people who don't know what light bulb moment is. But is there a usual stage that people go through, or is it just all over the place where that people will have realizations?
Well, once you help, you know, you write down the issue and then the pain, and then once you go to step 2, which is these are your habits that you're doing for psychological payoffs, i.e. you're carrying out this action, this habit, this conditioning for the secondary reward, the psychological payoff that exists within us, which is a relief. Once you've got that down on paper, and then you've obviously got the plan to go forward, people have a light bulb moment as to say, I am creating this outcome. The reason my health or my finances or my career is this way is because of the actions I'm carrying out. And the reason I'm carrying out those actions is for payoffs, for psychological payoffs. And here's a plan for change. And before we go on to the plan for change, we have to forgive ourselves and others for their habits and payoffs. Now, and I think that's what the light bulb moment generally is for.
What is getting the plan together is where the light bulb.
Well, just writing down the picked up habits, the payoff, and then the plan. People then see their neural pathways are on paper, and they go, wow, here is why I am in pain. Here is why I have that result.
Yeah, yeah. And I've forgotten what I was going to say to you. It will come back to me, I am sure. Okay, all right. Oh yeah. Do people really struggle with the payoff thing? Because, you know, we were talking a little bit about it before the recording of, you know, why we do the stuff, even though it might be bad for us, we still do it because there's some, and I've listened to a lot of your Ask Techniques videos with people where they're doing some crazy stuff, but there's a payoff in there hidden. Like, why would I, you know, stick with a boss who's you know, bullies me? You know, why would I stick in a relationship where my husband or wife looks down on me? Or, you know, all of these horrible situations we find ourselves in. And like you say, people then learn that actually they're in control of that and they're actually creating that. Is that does that, some people really struggle with coming to terms with it? They kind of set those situations up for themselves to repeat past history.
Yeah, and I think what's so great about the Ask technique is that you see it's a tiny high, it's a tiny piece of familiarity, and then it's a massive crash. So if, for example, somebody is eating pizza because they have a junk food addiction, during the moment or the seconds of eating the pizza, they feel a familiarity, a pleasure, and a relief, but it's a tiny, tiny payoff. And then there's the massive crash of guilt and sadness and judgment for that habit. So once you let people know that the payoff is so small, it's so tiny, but there's a huge amount of pain, this is when they can transcend that and be willing to go into the uncomfortable zone and carry out the opposite behavior or action and practice it over time so that can become a new habit. So
it is a lot of the uncomfortable, isn't it, Kelly? I think even thinking of myself with, even as a coach, some of the, you know, the habits I was talking to you about previously in relationships, it's the comfortableness of knowing that that's what I like. Those are my tastes. These are the type of people I feel comfortable with. That's a hard habit to kick, even when you're aware of it, you know, as a coach.
And I think the absolute awareness is if you really go into that payoff and really see the pleasure and how temporary it is and how tiny it is compared to the pain, because on a soul level, your soul has to ascend that behavior, right? This is what's great about the Ask technique. It's actually a soul ascension technique because it's ascending the lessons of your soul. And that's the step 3 of it. On a soul level, if you can transcend that behavior, you're going to go into a whole new paradigm and a whole new ascension of self-esteem and awareness. And actually, if you really go into the payoff, you'll see how tiny it is and that the pain is a lot more.
And it's just complete programming, complete computer programming. It's just running the show.
Well, it's just you've modeled somebody that has that habit, such as a parent, or you've picked up a fearful behavior because of a past event. So say you've been bankrupt 3 times as an entrepreneur, you may then just settle in a normal job because that's much more safer for you. So it's either a parental conditioning or it's a past event, and it's a conditioning because it's been practiced within the neural pathway over and over and over, and so now it's a solid behavior. But behaviors can be changed, and they are changed when you've had enough of the old and you've had enough of the pain.
Or you see the impact, like you say, the impact to your soul of that little bit of pleasure, but all this bit down here of this is the impact, guys. Like, it's your choice. This is the impact on you.
Yeah, and how much more do you want to continue that pain? And you know, this is why when I see clients, I need them to be at a deep space of pain because then I can work with them. So I say, you know, how much pain are you in? How much are you willing to change? And generally, people change when they've had enough of that pattern. They've had enough of that wound. They've had enough of that picked up habit, and that's when it's perfect to apply something like the Ask technique or other cognitive tools out there to really transcend them out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Can we move on to the next bit? Whereabouts are you? Do you want to move on to the next bit? Because then I can ask a few questions. Yeah. Okay. So going on to your third part now, now we've covered a bit on the second, which is so the second bit was looking at the plan, you know, seeing which picked up habit, and then now the plan for new habits. On the third part, which is my favorite part, which is the growth part, you say, well, you mentioned, and you can elaborate on this, but it's to do with the lotus coming from the mud, which I just love. Is that something that you've picked up, or lots of cognitive behavioural therapists use that?
I mean, I always remember hearing that from Thich Nhat Hanh, you know, the lotus comes from the mud, and just knowing in my own life where I've had a huge amount of pain, and that pain changed when I had enough, and my life changed. Like, my codependency transcended on my second divorce, where I went down on my knees and I said, dear God, I know I'm codependent. Please take this behavior away from me. So yeah, my codependency was the mud, and being interdependent and independent is the flower. So yeah, step 3 of the technique helps you to be grateful for the lesson that you've learned through the pain. And if you really learnt that lesson, then the lotus can flower, as opposed to swimming in the mud, swimming in the karma of old stuff.
Yeah. Can we touch on, because throughout the whole technique, you do this lovely thing where you actually get people to accept at several of these stages, where, you know, for example, with James, as we were talking about, he was worried about staying in his comfort zone, but you were just getting him to appreciate that sometimes I stay in my comfort zone, and that's okay, I understand, and be able to have that, almost being able to give ourselves a hug, because we are so hard. Would you say, Kelly, that you do find a lot of people get a lot of relief from when you are able to get them to really accept it? And I think you did it again with James. You said, just don't judge it, it will come, because he was so desperate to change his career and stuff, and he was just like, it will come, because when you force it, it's not going to come. Does that really support people in the technique when you do that?
Yeah, so on step 2, when we write down the picked up habit, the payoff, and then the plan, which is the opposite habits. See, people can't change when there's a judgment, when there's an irritation, when there's an anger or a sadness towards themselves or other people for their habits and payoffs. So it is, people change when there is a centeredness and a forgiveness and a peace towards the habit and the payoff, and that's what sets up the whole neural pathway, a new behavior to happen. It is the forgiveness and the acceptance and a centeredness that sets up the new neural pathway for change, and then practicing that. So yeah, we can't change if there is judgment on any level, and really we can't judge ourselves or others, because we are all doing the best we can with the conditioning, past events and brain chemistry and current learned behaviors that we have. We're all doing the very best we can with our psychology, and to judge that is to be illusional about psychology.
To judge that is to be illusional, did you say, about psychology?
Yeah, if we're going to judge ourselves or other people for their actions or behaviors, we are being delusional and delusional about the facts of psychology. And the facts of psychology are, people, every single person on the planet is doing the best they can with the behaviors that they know.
Yes.
So every murderer, every narcissist, every sociopath, every, you know, suicide bomber, every angry person, everybody out there is doing the best they know with their brain chemistry, neural pathways, learned behaviors, current feelings, and they will only change that when they get to a rock bottom because of the consequences of that behavior.
Yeah, it's just the key is the judging, isn't it? And I can see that, how, you know, even in coaching and even with myself, it is just, you cannot move forwards when you've got that judgment or that sadness, as you said. There's still an element I can see in parts of my entrepreneurship and my going out in the world and my being a single mom of 2 children, going through a divorce and having a very successful father. You know, even though I've moved through all these different coaching levels and stuff, there is still elements of sadness, you know, sometimes running through. So I think we're still shifting that, wouldn't you say, Kelly? Even when people have done a very powerful ask session with you, there'll still be elements where this runs through all the threads, and we just slowly have to become aware of it.
Well, when they get into a real forgiveness of step 2 and a motivation to go forward for the plan and a gratitude for step 3, when we go back and ask them about the issue and the emotions, that will go down to 0. So that's when we know that the ask technique has worked really well, because after 15 minutes of doing it, we check the original emotions, and they'll go, I don't feel any anger. I don't feel any sadness. I don't feel any guilt. And that's when you know they're about to start change, because then the judgment and the negative energy is gone, and they are manifesting a new reality.
And the gratitude is there, as you're saying. They're grateful for the experience.
I'm so thankful I've had 2 divorces, because that really taught me about self-esteem and codependency.
Exactly. And I love that bit, because you said that because once we have that type of compassion, it's easier to move the change and accept when others are not moving the same direction. Your example in one of the ones I watched, a man, you said this man was being taught self-love and respect by the very people that criticized and were angry with him. And I just love that you say these people come along at the right stages, even though it seems horrendous, to teach us something that we just need to be taught. And it's
every man is a link in your chain of good. Everybody is attracted to you, and if it's a negative experience, it's because there's a negative karmic pattern that you are carrying out, and the ask technique is wonderful for dropping those patterns, those wounds, and those habits that don't serve you. And then once you do the technique, you go into step 3 and you say, I'm so grateful for this person that raped me when I was 4, because that's why I'm running an abuse center now for children. That's why I'm so strong. That's why I have this empathy. That's why I have this self-esteem. So I'm grateful for a past trauma such as rape, for example, because that is why I am the Lotus today.
Okay. And there's a question. So, and I know we've probably got about 5 more minutes of the recording. Is it sometimes the ones who seem like they don't get it that actually do get it? Like they might just struggle, but actually they really are getting it, or they've gone out of a session and then they get it? Is there some things like that?
Well, during the technique whether they've got it, because you see they shift or they don't. So most people shift, because step 1 is, how committed are you to shifting this? If they say 2 out of 10, forget it, I'm not working with you. If they say 10 out of 10, that means that they open up their mind and they are ready for the shift. And it's up to them to go forward and practice the plan. But generally, when I've done the technique, amazing results happen. Like, I did a technique on a woman that wanted a new job. She rang me 4 weeks later, I've got a new job. I did the technique on someone who had insomnia. She slept that night. I did the technique on an entrepreneur who wanted more profits. After doing the technique, 6 weeks later, he said, all the revenue's gone up in my company. I did the technique on a woman who had a 17-year codependency issue, and it was gone. So what I love about the ask technique is it creates really quite dramatic change immediately.
Sometimes we just need to give approval to ourselves, right? And then it's almost like this session is being able to just allow them to give their own approval. So do you check in with them later, or do they check back with you, or do you do a refresher course, or is there a need to do that? Or
well, I check via statistics 2 months later to see if the change is still, because it takes 23 to 66 days for new neural pathways to form and for new habits to form. So I check in 2 months later just to get our statistics. So I checked with a woman, I did smoking with the ask technique. I checked her 2 months later. Did you ever go back to the smoking? No, I never went back after that session. So no, I'm really pleased with the results that we're getting. We have one coach using the ask technique on military in the USA for PTSD, for veterans. So it's I love the results that we're getting as a result of this technique.
So good to have like little formulas, little tool sets where people can just do the work. And my last question was, what was the biggest change you've seen? I mean, you've mentioned some quite big changes there, or maybe what was the one? Actually, I'm going to change that. What was the one that you were most proud of Maybe it could be the one with yourself, because you've said, you know, some of the stuff that you've gone through, which is amazing, Kelly. And usually it is us, we go through it and then we invent a tool set for other people. What's the one you're most proud of?
I think the one where I did ask on a woman whose husband had just died of cancer, and she was in a lot of pain and sadness. And during that session, it was a beautiful, miraculous session where you could feel her really let him go through step 2, and she forgave herself for the habit that she was carrying out. And then when she contacted me and said, you know, Kelly, I feel like I'm starting my new life, I'm better able to cope. But yeah, that along with some other shifts. But you see when the client shifts, you can feel it in your own body. You can see the auras. You can see the whole change within their makeup. And it's always just wonderful to do this technique on anyone with any struggle that they're going through, knowing that you're going to get a really good result generally. Yeah.
Oh, I just thank you so much for sharing your technique. Usually I ask questions like, people in the podcast, you know, what was your personal learning, your business learning, etc. But you creating Ask for me has been your own personal learning, your own business learning of what really works for people, using the skills and techniques that you have. But you've come up with something that I love as a coach. I really relate to as a coach, the whole understanding the, you know, the low psychological habits and then the new higher performing behaviors. And I would just thoroughly recommend anybody who has got that, maybe, you know, they're kind of hitting a pain point, or an addiction or codependency or whatever it might be, to get in touch with you. So what's the best way, Kelly, for people to, because I know you're quite busy with your television and radio shows that you're doing as well, but what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
They can go on to serenitykit.com, and the technique is free. The worksheet is free and the videos. If they want to order a Serenity kit, which is a kit, they can. If they want to book a session, they can, or with one of my facilitators. And if they want to study Ask and become a facilitator, if they're a coach or a therapist, we have a course via the ICF for people to study, and they can get accredited. But yeah, it's all online at serenitykit.com.
And what's next for you, Kelly? Like, what excites you? Do you want to be going and speaking at big conferences and getting the word out there? Because obviously there's only one of you. So if you keep doing one-to-one sessions, it's going to take up a lot of your time. Where's the plan for you, that you get some fulfillment from it?
Yeah, so my plan is to get 600 therapists signed up and practicing the Ask technique around the world to help millions of people. And we're currently in the process of doing that now, training up coaches and therapists so that it can be used as a very powerful cognitive tool globally to help lots of people. And yes, along with that, I'll be going on TV and radio and doing big seminars about this technique. And I love doing the technique in a big seminar or a crowd. It's wonderful in a group, because it only takes 15 minutes. You watch someone shift within 10 to 15 minutes. And as you see them shift, you get a whole healing within the audience. So yeah. That's the plan, and steadfastly working through that.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I wish you the best of luck, and I know you'll be awesome, because I've seen you live, live recorded, you know, and it just works wonderfully. So thank you for sharing your time with us today on the podcast, and I look forward to watching what happens next.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.